I always say there is politics and then there is politricks. You get the gist? I have been following some of the events that have been happening on the political front in our nation, Zambia. And when I look at some of the current happenings, I am reminded of some of the events that happened in the past, and it almost feels like it's a song that Zambians have heard before, especially like an old song that is very familiar. And when it just plays, you already know, just from the direction of the beat, you can hear that, oh, this song, we know it, we know this song. Or if it's a similar song, you already know that, this is like that other song that we heard before, you know. Yeah, so I've been following some of the things that are happening, you know, the fracas that's happening in the biggest opposition party in the country. And I'm reminded of 2011 when the MMD lost power to the Patriotic Front, commonly known as the PF. And what ended up happening in that time was that RB, the late, lost power to Michael Sata, the late. And in that particular moment, Michael Sata was president up to around 2014, which was the time of his untimely demise. And then RB in that moment, by 2015, remember there was an election in 2015 January that was like a by-election that was necessitated by the death of MCS, Michael Sata. And so at that time, 2015, RB was going to be the sole candidate for MMD. And then they did like a U-turn where he wasn't going to contest necessarily, but went into, you know, some form of alliance with the PF. And so what we saw happening there was a situation where some of the MMD members became ministers in the PF. You can remember the likes of Dora Silia, Vincent Mwale, Bowman Lusambo. You can remember the likes of Lucky Mulusa. I'm trying to remember more names, you know, the likes of Rafael Nakachinda, and many others that came from, you know, the MMD and the RB, and were now, you know, enjoying their time in the PF, and they were now in government. Others were ministers, others were deputy ministers at the time before the constitution got amended, where we no longer had deputy ministers. So then, do you remember what happened? By 2016, the MMD had to go for a convention for them to choose their leader who was going to lead the party going forward, including in the 2016 elections. So at that time, we ended up having a situation where there were two factions. So there was a Felix Mutati-led MMD, and then there was a Nevas Mumba-led MMD. And if you remember, from 2016 all the way to 2019, 3 years, there was a legal battle there to try and figure out who is the legitimate president of this political party, which at the time was the biggest opposition party. Now, you know, in Africa, it's almost proven that once a party is out of power, it's almost, and I'm saying almost categorically, impossible for them to bounce back. And it became very difficult for the MMD in that time. So now imagine if in 2016 or any other year, subsequent years, they had to field a candidate. When you have two presidents, seemingly, you're going to have a situation where you start saying, oh, so who's the real president here? Who do we put on the ballot paper? And what that does usually is that it, you know, necessitates a legal battle. So there was a 3-year legal battle that happened where they had to figure out who is the real president of the MMD. And by 2019, a judgment was passed, and Dr. Nevas Mumba emerged president of the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, MMD. Now that 3 years of being in court can be very, very exhausting. So when I look at the situation in the Patriotic Front right now, where you have the Miles SAMPA faction, and then there is this other faction, which at the moment we don't really know who's going to lead it, but of course we've got the likes of ECL, and we've got other people also who paid the 200,000 kwacha nomination fee, the likes of Dr. Chimbakambwiri, you've got your Emmanuel Mwambas, you've got many other candidates like GBM and other candidates in the PF that are seeking the presidency of the biggest opposition party in the country. And if they go for their convention and they choose their leader, once they have that leader, then on this other hand, you had a situation where the Miles SAMPA team went and did their own, election, and Miles emerged as the leader of the PF in that respect. And then there's this other faction that's coming up, and soon you'll hear that they also have their leader. And then you have a repeat of what happened in 2016, where there was like Felix Mutati versus Nevas Mumba. And then what do you think is going to happen next? We hear of a legal battle, people go to court. Can we now ascertain who really is the president of this party? And then by 2025 or 26, which is very soon, the next election, 2026, nobody knows. Who knows what might happen, whether this legal battle will actually, be prolonged. And by that time, it's either, you're still in court, or who is the real, president of this party. And before you know it, that's how parties are destroyed. So because we're in a democracy, I think it's upon all of us to offer some advice to any people, whether we have an interest or not. But as Zambians, by virtue of being Zambian, we all have an interest in all the happenings in the political sphere, because at the end of the day, it's the political parties that form government. So we can only hope that in the PF, they can resolve their issues, and we can have, it's important to have an opposition party and many opposition parties in a democracy, because that is the only way that a government will be able to perform and also receive checks and balances from those, political parties, because they almost like represent, the people who cannot speak for themselves. As they offer those checks and balances, they are supposed to be a reflection of what the people are saying on the ground. So we can only hope that the PF can resolve their differences and, come up with a plan so that democracy can prevail in this country. It's very, very important for us to see competition at that level. I'm not talking about the competition within the party where you've got factions, but you can compete, of course, in a democratic way. But I also mean the competition that's supposed to exist between the ruling party and opposition parties. And we should never allow a situation in the country where it feels like opposition parties are becoming extinct or inexistent. It's very important for us to have a formidable and strong opposition in the country. That way we see a government performing. So I can only wish the PF all the very best, and I hope that this won't be a repeat of what happened to MMD, because as we speak right now, I don't know what the status quo is in the MMD. So take care.